Good morning. Happy Saturday to everyone. For some of you, it's not a good morning. It's a good afternoon. Either way, um, wherever you're at, happy Saturday. So today I'm going to be covering a couple videos. I'm probably going to start off with the Pine Creek politics one because anyone who's shown up live this early is used to some of my political ranting, so they're going to have a higher tolerance for it. So this is just me punishing the live crowd. Yeah, uh, congratulations for being here early. You get to, you get to get the worst of the show right off the bat. But then I'm going to move into the rest of, I hope the rest of Eli Ayala's Presup 101 thing that I started last week, and hopefully get through all of it, or at least the rest of the bulk of it. I think I covered about 45, 47 minutes of it. So yeah, this will be my last go, whether I complete it or not. I think I did a pretty good job of kind of ranting about the reasons I thought he wasn't really off to a great start. I think Floyd FP made a great point in that last video where he was wondering like when Eli was going to actually get to like a tactic or like kind of plan or strategy to kind of lay out like here's how you want to use precept in a conversation. This is how it unfolds. This is how it works. This is what it means. These are the entailments. Blah blah blah. He didn't really start getting into that. At 47 minutes, he really didn't get into that. It was a lot of prep work. So we're gonna get into that. I wanted to start this PineCreek hasn't. I haven't seen much political stuff from him, but again, I don't normally watch his longish videos. His normal hangouts. They're about 3 to 4 hours long, usually once a week. Sometimes twice a week if he goes live on a weekend. I haven't seen one recently, and I haven't seen him make clips of it other than this short that he made recently. And I thought it's only a minute, and I kind of wanted to just go over it and give my take on it because it's a weird one. Anyway, with that being said, let's go through and say good morning to everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. Michael Deaton is here. Good morning, Michael Deaton. Good to see you, and thanks for that reminder. Jadis Tucker is here. Also, good morning. Cascade. Scott Duke is here. Good morning, Scott. Scott is equating my content with Saturday morning cartoons. I think that is an honor that is too high. The entertainment value that I received from Saturday morning cartoon, I don't think I deliver that. But it's nice. It's a nice thought. Shape shifting monkey is here. Yeah, and subscriber mode is on, I should say. Good to see Shapeshifting Monkey. Michael Deaton had asked that. I've given my reason in there. I just thought that, when I cover Pine Creek occasionally, some of Pine Creek's fans will get a little excited and will come into the comments. I don't know if they often come into the live comments, and I haven't figured out what to do. I don't know if the subscriber mode works for comments posted at, in the comments section for the video itself. I don't think it does. I think anybody's free to comment, but generally, this is what I would hear. I figured, if they wanted to show up and air grievances or something, they at least ought to, subscribe for 5 minutes. So yeah, Vanguard Shield is here. Spooky Bed Hair's here with a great sandwich, bacon sandwich, coffee, and he's got chocolate biscuits on standby. Those biscuits, that's cookies for us in the U.S. Yeah, and they are McVitie's. He confirmed McVitie's Hobnobs with that milk chocolate, y'all. My darkened understanding. Doug backing off the politics a little lately, Jeff. Yeah, no, I don't think so. But good to see you. And I mean, he is and he isn't. He's definitely not. I don't think he's like harping on the kind of the trans woke stuff as much. But I think he might get into more politics as the year gets closer. As the election draws closer. Manny Perez is here. Got the notification just in time. Oh, great. Good to see you, Manny. Yay, the worst show ever. I've gone from watching Saturday morning cartoons to this. Life's a trip. I've gone from watching Saturday morning cartoons obsessively to making this. So, yeah, some of us have fallen further. Joe. Clive Gordon is here. Good to see you. Paul D. God equals the square root of. Good to see you both. Babyfoot is here. Thank you again. I did get that link, Babyfoot. Thank you for sending that. Eli Ayala, Babyfoot sent me a link to a video that I had not seen in a while. I'd only seen bits and pieces of, and I kind of forgot about covering it. It is a conversation between Eli Ayala and Darth Hawkins. And it's a little over a year old, I think. I have not watched it all, but I am getting close to that. That's going to be an interesting one to cover because he doesn't get all worked up in that one, I don't think. God equals, good to see you. Thanks, Scott. It's brunch. Let's see. I think that does it. Oh, and Road No Last Name is here. I didn't have enough coffee yet. I didn't either. But then again, I drink decaf, so it takes a while for me to get good and jacked up on it. Nicola got back in cell service just in time to watch this. I want to learn how to win constantly with Presup. And that's what Eli promises. I mean, you'll be winning so much, it'll go straight to your head. That's what we covered last time. Okay, so first things first, let's jump into little PineCreek's little political announcement. He made this short. It's a minute long. Let me pull it up here. Let's see. Let me embiggen this because it is a short. So he's in the, he's in the profile mode there. And yeah, we'll jump right into this, and then I'm just gonna make a couple comments, and then we'll get back. We'll get into Eli. I don't know which one people are looking more forward to, but I think that PineCreek makes some genuinely bad observations here. I think you probably all suspected that that's where I was going to go with it. Otherwise, why would I feature it? So here we go. Decaf is against Jesus. I mean, he rose from the dead, so yeah, I assume that he drank only the leaded variety. Yeah. Okay, here we go. This is why an atheist would vote for Trump in under a minute. This really isn't why an atheist would. This is why Doug would. But he does like to poke a little bit with his titles. So again, normal rules apply. Yell at me if the sound's not coming through. Let's see here.
Stopwatch. Start. Okay, I'm going to vote for Trump over Biden because I am willing to compromise. I think Trump is a narcissist. He has done probably some bad things in the past. It's not a great role model for young people today or for anybody in general. However, I think that he is more akin to things I value. Like, I am not a climate change alarmist. I'm against all the woke business, gender ideology type stuff. Okay. I'm still for smaller government, and he tends to be a smaller government guy. The Republican Party in general, even though they're terrible at that as well. And for immigration, I think the perception of him being a racist bigot is actually good to when it comes to immigration, because you want to control the crowds that are coming across, and he'd be more likely to put the military on the border. That was 54 seconds.
Okay, so let's try to break down exactly everything that's wrong with that. So, at the beginning, he let's play this again. I'll go through this point by point. I think Cascade says, as an active duty service member who served under 3 administrations, the most embarrassed I've ever been was when Trump was in office. Yeah, I can see that. My father, my twin brother, both served, and my sister served for a little while, older sister. I never joined the service, didn't have the temperament for it. Somebody who does this kind of content and nitpicks about the things people says would not handle somebody yelling at me saying, drop and give me 50. I would probably, get Irish and sassy with him and be like, 50 what, drill sergeant? So yeah, I just start playing word games with people. Anyway, I think this is kind of key because even for them, both of them got out of the service before Trump got in. My father retired out of the military, reservist. He was in active duty back during the Vietnam era, but he did reserve stuff and got a pension from that. And my brother did a little bit of reservist, so he was active duty for a little while. And neither one of them thought Trump was particularly good for the military, even though they had friends and, former associates that were saying this kind of, oh yeah, Trump's going to make America great again. And they're like, as a soldier, you should not be looking forward to this. This guy's a clown. So yeah, I understand that. I've heard that from other former and current members of the military that are not that thrilled with it. Yeah, border, woke, trans. That about sums it up. Yeah. Thank you, MDU. That does kind of sum everything that he's saying up. I don't understand this kind of justification other than to say, normally, I'll lay this out as boringly as I can. Boringly, is that an adverb? Anyway, I think that when it comes time to vote for somebody into office, I don't know that I don't particularly feel like I have to personally like them. That's not what I'm voting for. If you're voting for a president, you're voting for somebody who's going to serve in the executive capacity as the president of the United States, right? They're in that branch of government. If you're voting for any of your representatives, senators, they're serving in the legislative side. If you depending on where you live and how judge things work, you're picking them. You're picking people hopefully that are good at their job and have demonstrated an ability to communicate how they're going to do that job that's appropriate for the job itself. Having people come out and say things about what they're going to do for the country that go beyond their remit for their job description has been kind of common, especially when you start getting into, like, this is a common thing that conservatives used to say about the supposed left-leaning ones. The liberals were going to come in and fundamentally change the fabric of the country. They were going to with their activist ways and their activist judges. And now what we're seeing is actually the conservative movement doing that instead. They've actually been the ones that they are now using an activist court. They're appointing Heritage Foundation kind of approved activist judges who get on there to kind of move things in a more conservative bent. So the things that they decried, they thought the liberals were doing, they have been actively pushing for, and now they've gotten some of them, especially in the judicial branch, but they do this even in the legislative branch. And if you wanted a great example of this, there's a new budget that came out from a Republican group. I can't remember the acronym for them, but I think it's Heritage Foundation approved, and it's like the group. There's like 170 Republican politicians currently that are members of this particular little group. It's not a caucus or anything like that, but it's sort of like ALEC or something like that. And their budget is gross. It would be really bad for the economy, which kind of goes without saying. But anyway, if you're going to vote for these people, you should be voting for people that you think can administer what they're doing well. And what PineCreek is actively looking for is not that. And he's actually violating a couple of his previously stated positions in this video. Yeah, Michael says Trump being a racist bigot is good. Doug from PineCreek. Yeah. And for whatever reason, he seems to think like, oh, it's good because it's going to scare away the immigrants. No, it's going to only scare away certain kinds of immigrants. I don't know if Doug remembers when, Trump made the infamous quote about people coming from quote unquote shithole countries. He didn't want those. PineCreek is jealous of Trump's hair. In fact, I'm a little jealous of Trump's hair. It's straw, but it looks like a helmet. It's kind of cool until the wind blows. Yeah, God equals the square. The GOP is not for smaller government. No, they're not, especially not anymore. They're really not. Excellent live stream with my enormous Spanish. Everybody's got a better breakfast than me. I'm getting ready for a medical procedure, so my morning breakfast was an Orgain shake, one of those pre-made ones in the little the little portable tub things. Awful. Yeah, I don't. If Orgain wishes to sponsor this content, I enjoy your product. I don't think they're listening. So between me and my audience, Orgain makes a product that, frankly, kind of sends me to the bathroom, but it's nutritional, I guess, and it's low volume, so it's good for what I've got coming up beginning of next week. TMI. I think you guys can guess what the medical procedure is. It's routine and not dangerous, and everybody's supposed to get it at a certain age. So there, I've made it easy to guess. Trump being a racist bigot can be good for others. If he wins the election and the NDP pick up a few more seats in Canada, Trump will build a wall to keep the Canadian woke out. Canadians approve. Yeah, and with the Canadian wall, I'm sure he won't even insist on asking the Canadians to pay for it because he knows the answer is just like get wrecked and get a library card, read a book. Yeah. All right. So let's go through this again. I'm going to take this point by point.
Stopwatch. Start. Okay, I'm going to vote for Trump over Biden because
I like how he's going to vote for him because, and he's going to give the reasons why he's not a good candidate.
I am willing to compromise. I think Trump.
I think everybody compromises when they vote. Like, I'm not a huge Biden fan. I've liked some of the stuff, some of the policies he's put out in his first term. I think he's gone further on some of the things than I thought he would. I think his policy on the Middle East and the situation going on in Israel and Gaza is improving now, but it has been atrocious, and we're looking at one of the biggest, most horrific humanitarian crises going forward because the United States is blinkered by, well, certain aspects of the U.S. are completely blinkered by a conservative Zionist project over there with the Israeli military and the Israeli government. So I think that needs to get adjusted, but that's just my 2 cents. Here we go.
Trump is a narcissist.
So he's a narcissist. Is it a good idea to have somebody with a narcissist? If you believe that he's a narcissist not in some kind of colloquial sense, but like he genuinely has a potential, a diagnosable personality disorder. You know, he's got psychological mental problems that are not being addressed. He's a narcissist. Is it a good idea to have somebody? Is that not? Are they not compromised? Like, it's one thing for him to stand up there and tout how great he is, and I'm the best, but it's if you're a narcissist, like, to what degree? Is he a malignant narcissist? Will he lie to the detriment of, I mean, he is doing things now at this point to bolster his ego that are costing him lots of money, like the E. Jean Carroll case and things like he's demonstrated an inability to just even kind of conform to that, which tells me that not only is he a narcissist, he's likely a malignant narcissist, and he's not that smart. It's all ego all the time now. He's not even smart enough to know, like, look, if you're going to perform like this, it's going to cost you. And he's just doing it anyway because he can't ever he can't ever take a step back and figure out a different way to kind of play the game, which tells me he's not clever, he's not tactical, he's not there's nothing there.
He has done probably some bad things in the past. It's not a great role model for young people today or for anybody in general. However, I think that he is more akin to things I value. Like, I am not a
Okay, so far you haven't demonstrated that, but
climate change alarmist.
You don't have to be a climate change alarmist to think that it's going to be okay to just start punching more holes in North America to get more fossil fuels out to burn. You don't have to be a climate change alarmist to think that that's a problem. We've hit a point where trying to rely on that as a primary energy thing is dangerous. We are going to run out of fossil fuels, and the idea of burning them and putting the carbon into the atmosphere that we're walking around in is not a cool idea. You don't have to be a climate change alarmist. That, like, if Doug thinks, like, I don't think the world's going to end, I think there'll still be people here. Yeah, but how like, Doug's supposed to be the prude, and I don't mean prude in the priggish moralist sense, but he believes in sort of fiscal responsibility and this kind of stuff. If you don't have to think that humanity is going to be eliminated from the face of the planet, to think that climate change is not also going to be a problem for weather disaster causing massive amounts of damage that we are then going to have to pay for. Insurance companies acknowledge that this is a problem because they're getting ready to exclude certain things from being covered now. I mean, this started in flood-prone areas, and those are expanding. So this is going to get worse. More and more of those companies are going to look to shirk that and leave it on and try to externalize that liability, that increasing liability, into the public sector. That's going to go on state and federal governments. So that's not a smart move. So the fact that he's not a climate change. Whether you are in it for the money, whether you are in it for the species, whether you are in it for making the air cleaner and the water cleaner, you should be a climate change alarmist because it's basically just pollution. You should probably want to pollute the local environment and the global environment less because we rely on the local and global environment to eat and breathe.
I'm against all the woke business, gender ideology type stuff. I'm still for smaller government, and he tends to be a smaller government guy.
Wrong. He does not. The pandemic proved that. They do not. They're less regulation for, and Doug's not for this either. He's not for smaller government. What they are for is a federal government that does not respond to the needs of individual citizens. They are instead for a government that dumps money into propping up American systems. So the military defense institutions, those kinds of things, that those are good because we need a national defense, right? And we need it to be huge and bigger than any other developed country combined. Um, Usually according to conservatives. And then on top of that, we can use some of that to take care of the problems at home. And also, we need to make sure that all the companies get deregulated, so nothing stands in the way of them making an enormous amount of profit. We need to make sure that we only tax the middle class to working class, which is now just becoming the working class, and anybody that is in the capitalist the financial and insurance, real estate, parasite economy, continue to hoover up more and more of the nation's share of profit. That they get deregulated, they get benefits, they get tax cuts, because we need to make sure that the parasite expands while it's killing the host, and what's actually productive and useful dies. That's been the Republican capitalist kind of take for generations now. And PineCreek's like, no, that's what we need. We need a quote unquote smaller government. They do not believe in a smaller government. They believe in a government that does not provide services to the working class, whom they tax, but provides all the benefits and services to an entrenched capitalist class, which generates a lot of profit. And then they can say, well, we're doing what we need to do for the economy, and then pivot some of that. If they're going to engage in reckless government spending, it's going to be in engaging in, multi-theater wars and spending an enormous amount of money on defenses. Not to say that I'm against necessarily being involved in some kind of international conflicts. I think they're justified, but the idea that like with George W. Bush, you had a guy that said that we needed to privatize Social Security while he put 2 wars on the table for us is intense. And even had some people at the time saying, well, hey, you know what? War is good for business, and it's an employment opportunity for many young people.
The Republican Party in general, even though they're terrible at that as well.
Okay, so he acknowledges the Republican Party is terrible about being small government, but he wants Trump in there because at least he's paying mouth service to the small government ideology. That seems hypocritical.
And for immigration, I think the perception of him being a racist bigot is actually good when it comes to immigration.
No, because the issue here is that Doug is informed about the immigration issue in this country by what's going on with refugees and asylum seekers crossing the border, and some of them are many of them are crossing illegally, and they cross illegally, they get caught, and that's when they declare asylum. The problem with that is that the immigration issue is the asylum process. Do we have enough judges? Do we have enough to administer those asylum claims and do it quickly? Currently, we don't.
You want to control the crowds that are coming across, and he'd be more
control the crowds. You don't need to control the crowds.
More likely to put the military on the border. That was 50.
So put the military on the border. So he wants a small government, but he wants the immigration issue to be administered by seemingly the only thing that he thinks can effectively administer it, which is the federal government in the form of the military. State of Texas would disagree with Doug. The state of Texas is taking its own steps and paying its own money into this process because they're protecting not only the U.S. border, specifically their portion of the border, but the border of Texas. Can't allow these people to come one step closer. Can't have this lawlessness in our land. So even though that's inappropriate and a giant waste of state money, if anything, if Abbott has a problem with it, he needs to petition the federal government to kick up that thing. The other problem with that is that the ability to pay to make sure that this stuff is working does not really come from executive decisions, because executive decisions can state something, but they don't fund it. If you want funding, you need Congress. And Congress had the ability to pass a law, which was not great, but would have provided the conservatives with most of the tough-sounding stuff that they wanted, and they whiffed on it. They swing and a miss. Because Trump wants to be able to continue to use quote-unquote immigration and the border as a campaign boogeyman, even though they sort of had their solution in hand, and then they crushed it, like Tommy Boy crushed his biscuit, his little pet. Also, Doug has laid out his idea. Titan says the crowds, lol. Yeah, and to me, I'll put this out there with the border thing. When people cross over, I don't think that's a problem, right? Most of these people cross over, they're found, they're seen, they're arrested, especially if they're crossing illegal. They're charged with a misdemeanor. They usually declare asylum, right? They get a court date. The problem is their court date by the time the asylum thing is administered, it takes anywhere from 6 months to 6 years. And in that amount of time, these people are basically, can be here in limbo. The problem that these people seem to have is like, well, if their asylum case is pending, they are not here illegally. They're just not citizens, and most of them end up working. They end up paying taxes. They're definitely paying sales taxes. They're trying to do everything. They have no representation while they're in this legal limbo. If you cared about this issue at the border, the idea that they come over is not a big deal. The idea that they cross, I mean, it can become a logistical issue if you've got a refugee situation, and that would require federal funding so that if they land in, say, a city like New York or in places like Chicago or Boston or DC, there's federal funding to help them get settled, get food, things like that to get them started. But if they're pending these cases and they're basically in this legal limbo, it makes sense to try to clear them out of that legal limbo as fast as possible, which means you'd want to fund more administrative law judges to get in there and get those cases processed and taken care of, not less. My understanding is the last immigration bill that they had, that they nuked, had that. It did have funding for that, which I don't think conservatives cared that much about. They cared more about the militarization of it, because this is the point is the show. The border is the thing that they like, because they can point to the border and like, these people are just trespassing into your land. It makes an easy visual because it's like, it appeals to people who are like Doug, not in my backyard types, right? I don't want to see that happen in this country. And so they want a wall of soldiers making sure that they can't cross at all. The problem that Doug seems to have is he doesn't understand that this is a major international incident, because while those people are able to pass from Central American countries or South American countries like Venezuela up through Mexico, they're able to do this usually on like tourist visas and things like that, depending on the agreements those countries have in terms of allowing citizens from those countries to pass on their way through. If the military just keeps them all stationed, they're just left squatting. Oh yeah, we'll take your asylum, but you can't cross into the country. We don't want you in here waiting for your asylum case or working here. You're going to stay put. You don't have to stay in Mexico, but you can't come in here. And we're going to post a wall of guards and a giant wall to make sure that that doesn't happen. And that's going to leave a bunch of people like Venezuelans and Salvadorians and Guatemalans. The Guatemalans were one of the last big groups 6 years ago, in Mexico, which is going to cause an international incident, not only between Mexico and those countries, but between Mexico and us. Because we do have an asylum process, and normally they would be able to come in. But now we've decided, no, we're going to use our military to make sure they can't come in at all. And we don't have a problem if they just squat here in northern Mexico waiting for things to happen. By the way, will Congress speed things up to make sure their asylum cases get a definitive yay or nay? No. Nope. Doug doesn't mention that. Just the military on the border so we don't have to see these people on Fox News cross. I've got news for Doug. Watching people from the South cross our border is precisely what Republicans want. They want that on Fox News, Newsmax, every news channel. They want it on every single day. Because every time that happens, they can spin that narrative into quote unquote invasion, quote unquote trespassing, quote unquote criminalization at the border. It's an insecurity. We need to shore up this country. If it goes away, if it gets shored up, they have no more issues to talk about. They need that for fear mongering. The last thing they want is the border visuals to go away. They don't care about the substantive problem, which is the asylum process. They're doing nothing about that. They rarely even talk about it, other than to phrase it as, these people come in here, they throw themselves on the court gives them a pass and just allows them to linger here, in which they apply for all the benefits, and then they get all the benefits, the bennies, all the free money starts flowing down to them, and they can just kick back in a hammock and relax. Like, that is not how it works for any immigrant that I've ever seen, ever. But that's the visual they want, and that's what Doug's voting for. He's voting for a fantasy. If he thinks the Republicans are going to actively do something to stop the visuals of immigrants from the South crossing into this country, he is high as a kite. Absolutely out of control. The last president to do the most deportation of people living here illegally or people not qualified to remain here was a Democrat. And that was Barack Obama, who deported in his 2 terms more individuals than any president, every president combined, all of them, Republican or Democrat. I don't know why he would be voting for a Republican, other than the fact that he is voting for the guy that he thinks provides him the optics. So this is just superficial bullshit. Okay, so that's it for that. Let's get Doug out of there. Doug is moving into performative fascism as he ages. I'm going to blame Arizona on that. His time spent in Arizona, I think he's gotten a little sunstroke. I don't think Trump cares about gender issues one way or the other. I don't think he does either. Chris, I'm trying to practice for a gig, dude. What are you doing? If this is your quiet time, Chris, I do apologize. But just turn it off. Just try this. This isn't like the Max Headroom future where none of the screens come with off buttons. You can turn it off. I mean, we're getting close. We are getting close. And Titan made a quote thing here about Biden having done a pretty good job, given that he's a conservative. But when he fails hard, like he really collapses on his face, and I would agree with that. Let's see. Just weeks ago, a whole bunch of Christo-fascists ran as fast as they could to fight the quote invading hordes, and there was nobody crossing the border. Law. That's interesting. I would be interested in seeing that. I wonder how bad it would hurt the Donald's campaign if Melania divorced him. I don't know that it would hurt him at all. I mean, the base is going to vote for him regardless. And my guess, the base were also the only ones I thought that were willing to turn Melania into some kind of American version of Princess Di, even though that was never getting off the ground because, let's face it, Melania just doesn't have that factor. So, let's see. Turing test is here. Good to see you. This is why they all refuse to even talk to Biden about the border crisis they're always yelling about. Yeah, they're not interested. The fact that they're conflating all of immigration's issues with a quote unquote border crisis. The only crisis that's really going on is that you have a lot of refugees coming in at one time, and that becomes an issue for the cities that they eventually end up in, as you're seeing in places like New York and Chicago. The interesting thing about this is to hear hear on the news them say, "Oh, well, now the cities are declaring a state of emergency." Cities and states will declare states of emergency in order to free up federal funding. That's how they get access to federal funding. The idea that they're declaring a state of emergency is not them like, oh, we admit it, we were wrong. It was bad for us to be a quote sanctuary city, even though a sanctuary city just means they didn't want their local law enforcement doing the work of immigration agents. That's all a sanctuary city is. But for whatever reason, the right to the sanctuary cities basically they have this like charter that says they'll welcome in all of the world's refugees. Like that is not a sanctuary city. That's not what it is. Much the way he said stop counting COVID cases and deaths and the problem goes away. He underfunded immigration forces so fewer immigrants were captured and pretended it was a win. Yeah, Cascades. Republicans hated immigration reform under Obama also. Yeah, it resulted in the kinds of things that they wanted, they claimed to want. They claimed they wanted more deportations. But a lot of conservative companies don't necessarily want that because they're able to exploit this kind of labor. What's the meat packing plant? Is it Smithfield down in North Carolina? Actually has some kind of revolving door of workers that they bring in. And then they'll churn out like a third of them every quarter straight to INS, and they end up those people that come up, they get to work for a season, they make some money, they're kind of doing it under they could be one of the third that gets kind of culled, sent to the INS and sent back. They get deported, but they leave, they made a little bit of money, and it was worth it. There we go. So I don't know how many other companies have these kinds of revolving door things, but the Smith, I'm pretty sure it was Smithfield. It might have been another meat packing company. But yeah, it's been an issue for a while. I've been interested in Doug since he came out MAGA right before the red piffle in 2022 midterms, and I called him our new lol skull, and he blocked me on all his channels. Yeah. Melania better hurry quick, or else there won't be any money left for her and Barron. I mean, most of it's spoken for, I think, at this point. So yeah, I think Doug is interesting because he's a smart guy with some messed up opinions. I don't think that Doug is willing to admit to people. I don't know if he talks about this. I think he is a smart guy. I don't think that he's willing to acknowledge how much of his politics and stuff are being informed by really crappy U.S. media. I have based on the stuff that he kind of approaches and like his impressions of things. I don't. He's not digging deep into a lot of this stuff. This is like vibes only kind of shit, and it's vibes only from an aging Gen Xer who's kind of conservative and just doesn't get the woke stuff and doesn't care about the climate change. Yeah, it's not the sky falling. It's like, no, it's the sky on fire, but that's fine. Um, Nicola writes, in 2012, Trump overturned a Miss Universe decision to ban trans women from competing. I wonder how PineCreek would take that little tidbit of info. Oh, yeah. I wonder. Yeah, I wonder. Megalite Jack. Yes, I live in North Carolina. Smithfield is infamous for that, along with other hog plants here. Yeah, yeah. I can't remember where I read that Smithfield thing. I think it was. I think it was in a book from. It wasn't Fast Food Nation. I can't remember where I read that, but it goes back years. He told me his conservative religious upbringing bears no weight on his political bullshit. I don't buy that. I think you don't either. Yeah, I don't understand. It clearly does. There's a lot of cultural conservative Christian stuff baggage in there that he still holds to, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I mean, I came from that kind. I didn't come from a Mennonite tradition, but I was raised up in an evangelical household, homeschooled K through 12. My parents were committed to being anti-public school, and so I came up in that, and that informed a lot of my politics, cultural views, all those kinds of things for years. It wasn't until I kind of got out of the house and went to college, and hell, even going to college and stuff was tough. I mean, not just because I was a homeschooler before there was an internet, which is tough. Trying to get an education from a library card and two parents is not easy. Those are, the odds are stacked against you when those are your only resources, and you grew up in a small town. Then you add on top of that you end up kind of changing times and stuff, and you're kind of stuck in homemade clothes and canned goods, and you know raising rabbits for meat kind of stuff was sort of your foundation, childhood foundational stuff. And then you start kind of entering modernity again. It gets weird. um and it still stays with me. Let's see. All right, so here it is. We're going to get back into revealed apologetics here and his Presup 101. Just got to shake off the political rage. Okay. Um, it's telling that only trans women, the only trans woman Trump was attracted to was Rudy Giuliani in his native state wearing a dress, which he 100% does all the time at home alone. I don't think he does, to be fair, Dean. I don't think that's fair. I don't think Giuliani is with it enough to put the face on, to do the hair, get the dress on. It's just my thing. I think I think he's a polo shirts and sweatpants kind of guy, day to day. Probably skipping showers. That's just my thinking. Um, Alex, this is an interesting point. Yeah, PineCreek is the worst kind of conservative, a paternalist, i.e., you left wingers with all your silly little ideas need us right wingers to exist to watch over you and tell you how silly you are. Yeah, he does give that vibe quite a bit. And when he talks about this, when he talks to people who state that they're liberal and state that they're left wing in some of his other chats, he'll ask people like, well, isn't there anything about the conservative worldview that you like, or what about the conservatives do you like, or conservative politics? And generally speaking, like I would be in favor of conservatism, quote unquote, if it was trying to conserve certain aspects of kind of the Enlightenment values that undergird the founding documents, instead of trying to pivot those and turn them into some kind of Christian nation Bible 2.0, kind of documents, and they're just as revelatory and just as inspired kind of crap. We're a Christian nation, get on board or get out kind of crap. That to me is where, you that's not conservative. That's a revision. That is a radical revision of it. That's just Christian nationalism trying to rewrite history to favor its ascendancy to power. I think, if Doug's trying to tell me like, well, what about conservatism do you like? Like, I like early American history when I can go back and read these documents, because I thought some of the guys that wrote this stuff were pretty smart and did seem to have a pretty good handle on Enlightenment values. Did they fail to live up to those values? Sure as shit did. Also, George Washington was an asshole who abused his slaves. He was a piece of shit. So I'll get more into that come 4th of July. All right. Okay. So switching gears, we're getting back into this. Where we left off, I think, was this slide. Presuppositions to be examined. Eli is getting back into this. Again, just to refresh everybody on where we were, since we're kind of slamming brakes on the politics stuff and switching over into revealed presup. What did he cover? You needed to, if you're going to engage in presup as a Christian, you're going to do this with atheists, you need to make sure that you pray. Because you're not only entering into like a dialogue and a potential argument, but you're also entering into spiritual warfare. And you need to pray to prep yourself and prep your soul for the fact that you're going to kick up the Angie in the demon, in the atheist across from you. And he didn't say it that way. I'm putting it that way, but there's definitely a little bit of, when you start using JC around some of these people, don't be shocked when they burp up the split pea soup, or their head spins around, or they burst into a cloud of bats. Just saying, Holy Spirit, you invoke those words, Holy Spirit and JC and all that kind of stuff. You never know. You never know where spiritual battle is gonna lead you. And I hope you've got your, +9 spiritual armor and your, sword of faith +12, to go into that battle, even though those are all invisible. All right, so here we go. So that was basically where I got, don't let it give you a big head. You're going to win tons of arguments if you do, so don't get proud about it. Remember, it's about Jesus first, not you. Pray, and then also make sure that you're arguing from God, not to God, because that's always good.
Want to account for these from within our own perspective. And of course, all of these things come from God. Okay. This is what the scripture teaches. Okay. Now, what is required for evidence? Someone asked for evidence. Well, what do we need in order for evidence to even make sense? Again, are all things. All right. So not only do we ask the unbeliever to give an account for truth, logic, reason, these sorts of things from his non-Christian perspective, we also want to account for these from within our own perspective. And of course,
we want to be able to account for them from their own perspective. Let me guess. The accounting for all those things is God. God did it. God made it. That's it.
All of these things come from God. Okay. This is what the scripture teaches. Okay. Now, what is required for evidence? Someone asked for evidence. Well, what do we need in order for evidence to even make sense? Again, truth, logic, reason, okay, etc. A bunch of other things as well. Okay. How do you make sense out of these things? And if you can't tell me how you make sense out of these things, then how can we meaningfully talk about evidence? Right? What counts as evidence? What must be true in order for evidence to even be a thing?
I guess God has to be true in order for evidence to be a thing, or truth to be a thing, right? I mean, that's what we're going to presuppose, right? Just like I presuppose my subjective experience, I presuppose that God is necessary for that subjective experience from the jump. Even though I'm not presupposing God, I'm inferring him from my subjective experience. So, case closed, Eli loses. Aaron says, I will go on a little bit more. I tried to prepare for spiritual warfare when I was a pagan, but the police frowned on me wearing nothing but blue face band. Yeah, in my experience, law enforcement does not like that look. Unless you woed up for like something like January 6th, some law enforcement might dig it. You can pagan up as much as you want. Just throw an American flag over your shoulders. You'll be fine. Uncle Charlie, this is horrible. It reminds me of the sales seminar. This is one thing I will give Doug. Listening to Doug talk about stuff, even though I think, especially when he gets into politics, I think that his politics it's just not even a train wreck. It's a sequence of train wrecks. He does have the grit. He can talk a good talk, and it's fun to kind of engage with his points one-on-one. Eli has assembled something that is like kind of a high school presentation or a Sunday school presentation, like, hey, you want to know more about Presup 101? This is how we beat the atheists. And then you sit here and it's just like, well, what we want to do, we're going to go after the atheists and how they pretend to think that they know stuff, but we have to make sure that they can't accuse us of pretending that we know things. So what we're going to make sure that we tell them is that the things that we know to be certain is we know God is certain, and therefore all the stuff that comes from God, which is all these things we stipulate do, are certain too. So bulletproof and get wrecked atheists. So yeah, it's very not this isn't inspiring, but
these are important questions that we need to ask if we're going to deal with the fundamental presuppositional issues. All right. When someone says, give me evidence, okay, here's my suggestion. Give it to them. Now, this is important because giving evidence to the unbeliever is not anti-presuppositional. What is anti-presuppositional is giving evidence in a neutral and autonomous fashion. Okay? And that's what we're not going to do. Okay? The reason for the evidence, as we said before, is to expose the suppression of truth. We're not providing education to innocent people who are genuinely seeking after God. We know what the Bible says about whether people are seeking God or not. Okay? So giving evidence is not equal to assuming neutrality and autonomy. So when someone says, give me the evidence, yeah, go into some of the evidence. There's nothing wrong and nothing anti-presuppositional about that. Now,
before I address this, I want to shout out to Titan. Thank you very much for sending those clips. I did check. I did get them. Sent you Discord DMs with links to hilarious events surrounding the army of God idiots who convoyed to Texas border to battle the invading hordes. Now, I had heard little shout outs about this stuff when they were prepping for this, like a week or two back, probably 2 weeks back. And that I wondered how it was going to turn out. I think it's interesting that when those groups say that, there'll be like a little bit of bubbling of things like, oh yeah, there's these right-wing groups, and they're gonna go down there and do something about the border, and then you almost never hear about like the actual. So it's good that somebody was taking video down there. I imagine they were. So yes, thank you for those. I may not get into them with this video, but I will watch them, and I might review them next week. I might get into some if the ones I find funny. Aaron Ritchie rediscovering his Pictus heritage. Next thing you know, he'll be waist deep in a bog, thumbing his nose at Roman soldiers. Exactly. Yeah. Just make sure that you got lots of woad on. It triggers Romans like nobody's business. Does anyone know why autonomous thinking is bad? No, I don't think anyone knows. Anytime I hear the word autonomous now, I immediately shift into like counter apologist like an apologist has shown up and I gotta they're gonna precept me. I don't know mostly because like I guess autonomous thinking would be bad because you can make choices that are sinful, but you also need to make those choices in order to be a free agent to freely choose God. So I would think that if your autonomous thinking can get you into trouble, but the reason the risk exists is because the autonomous thinking and the conclusions you make with it are indicative of an even better salvation or conversion to God. Like you're making the decision on your own. God's not brainwashing you. That's better. I would think it would be necessary. So autonomous reasoning should be good. But no.
We give the evidence, of course, from within a Christian context. Why? Because as presuppositionalists, as Christians, God exists, his word is true, and his word teaches that things only make sense in light of his revelation. Right?
I don't know that it does that. Like not the whole thing. This revealed ontology, revealed epistemology stuff that these guys claim is biblical, I don't know that that's actually quote unquote, again, biblical in the sense that they think they've got a narrative and a theological. This is just dogma. I don't, if you, depending on the book of the Bible that you read, it's going to get into different kinds of, you're going to be dealing with different philosophical concepts. This idea of that these guys are reading back into it of this is they're benefiting from the fact that they've got philosophers investing in these kinds of thoughts over thousands of years, and then they're cherry picking what they want and then reading it back into the Bible as a story, as opposed to reading the books of the Bible for, and trying to understand them for what they were. Crow Many Clouds says Christianity didn't survive the first century. What survived is Paulinity. Yeah, kind of, maybe. But I think even with some of the later Christian traditions and stuff, what we've got today probably would probably freak Paul out, especially since he thought that, Jesus is coming back any minute. Good to see you, Crow Many Clouds. Nice to have you here. Let's see. It's not about seeking truth. Remember, they already have the truth. Yeah, with a certainty. With a certainty.
Right? So I'm not going to give you the evidence within a context that is not a Christian worldview context, because part of our argument is that the non-Christian worldview context can't make sense of the evidence. Now, of course, the moment you give evidence within a Christian context, the unbeliever is going to reject it, because why? The unbeliever is going to reject your Christian context. And at that point,
because they're rejecting context, they're going to reject the evidence. That doesn't follow. Aren't the presuppers the ones kind of saying, well, you need the appropriate context in order to make the right inferences afterward? That's essentially what they're saying. You need to presuppose God, otherwise nothing makes sense without it. Maybe I'm being glib there. Nicholas says, I'd like to see a presuppositionalist define autonomous reasoning in a way that their detractor believes exists. I've seen Dede try it once, and it was like libertarian free will applied to reason. Yeah. I remember, I think I brought up like this. It wasn't with a presupper, but it was sort of just this problem, kind of central problem between Arminianism and Calvinism, with the idea, or they wrestle with the idea of free will. And Darth, for the longest time, has always been kind of in the case where he'll use this autonomous reasoning stuff from Van Til without realizing, like, Van Til was, he was a Calvinist. So a lot of stuff built into his theology would be based on things like irresistible grace and stuff like that. Like you're not choosing God, the Holy Spirit's choosing you, kind of stuff. So for somebody like that, who's sort of putting out a philosophical, I don't know what you want to call it, kind of a framework for things, if they're basing it on the idea that your conversion isn't really based on your will. It's not based on it's not based on your free will. It's not based on your thought. It's determined by God. You're chosen by the Holy Spirit. You're going to convert whether you like it or not. What you like doesn't have anything to do with it. You're going to like it when your heart changes. You're regenerated by that. And so from that point, that all of that revelatory stuff about epistemology and ontology is a little bit more consistent. But if you're trying to hold on to at least enough free will where you can blame somebody for not picking Jesus, because hey, you were told the story, you were shown the evidence, and then you made the wrong choice, I'm gonna call you stupid, like Darth does. I'm gonna call you stupid. I'm gonna say that you're a liar. You're just too stupid to understand this. You don't realize how good a deal this is. Like, that's not the point. I don't think that Darth has ever really considered at heart, especially with the Van Til aspect, Van Til's original precept stuff, has got a lot of that basic Calvinist theology ingrained in it, and he just sort of slides around like that. There's no entailment there.
We're simply going to ask, okay, you reject the Christian context. What context do you have to understand the evidence? And at that point, you're going to listen to what they say and offer internal critique of what they say.
You don't actually have to do this. The if you're talking to a presupper, I guess that's the best thing I can do now. Not that I'm like a champion at doing this or anything, but the thing that you could do if you're talking to somebody like Eli who's trying to use Presup on you, like, well, what context are you saying that you know things can be true or false? I'm like, well, I guess since you're presupposing that a God exists and God is the necessary foundation for everything that is, including you, me, and the conversation that we're having, I guess then based on if we're staying within this, sounds like Christianity is the only true representation of what's really going on. So Christianity is the only accurate worldview, or maybe even the only worldview possible, depending on how you consider whether the value of worldviews. So it's that. Now, given that that's how God has revealed himself and that we exist in this world, and I'm just going to presuppose that God exists. This God has objective morality. Now, it is told a group of people in the past that he had a covenant relationship with, that it was okay to own people. Now we believe that it's been revealed to us because of God's objective morality, his objective goodness, that owning people is not in fact a good thing. Given that we share the same worldview, only one worldview is possible because God created everything and God is basically responsible for our epistemology as well and our reasoning. How do you square that contradiction? It just adds weight to the problem, right? And what they'll do is like, well, hey, hang on. You're evaluating God from your reasoning. No, I'm evaluating God from his revealed reasoning. He told a group of people, according to the Bible, it was okay to own people. And now we claim as Christians, supposedly, that morally it's wrong to own people. Which group is right? Because they can't both be right. It can't be right to think that owning people is good and that owning people is bad. So given that this is the only worldview possible, God is the only foundation, the ultimate foundation for all things, how do we square this? Denial. Denial is how we're going to square it. If Eli then tries to shift and say, I don't think that you're, because if you really were in the fold, if you were really presupposing God, you wouldn't have these criticisms about what it says in the Bible. And that, for me, is that is a bridge too far. I really want to see somebody put one of these guys in that position. Like, I'm conceding that the Christian God's real. Now, how do we as Christians now, we're all Christians basically, right? I mean, there's just some that deny it. I'm no longer denying it. God's real. He's the necessary foundation. How do we as Christians deal with this fundamental contradiction? Oh, well, we're going to have to just say that's not what he meant, or that's not what it was, or he was working with these people and they were flawed and blah, blah. I'm like, nah, it doesn't square. He said that they were his chosen people and they were to be apart. He told them to kill the Moabites and the Amalekites and stuff because he didn't want them engaging in their ways, because they needed to be a separate people, sacred, set apart for him. They needed to be examples. So why let them do some of the things that the other places were doing when he clearly had a zero tolerance policy on them doing these other things that made them seem like the Moabites and the other Canaanites around them? That doesn't track. So any way you go with this kind of stuff, the presupper is going to put themselves in a position to basically just say, like, you know what, anybody like you calling into question this stuff hasn't signed on. You just don't get it. You're not tracking it. Now they've got to come up with more apologetics to explain away the stuff that doesn't work within their worldview. And the only thing that a presupper is going to appeal to is they're just going to go back and say, I'm not convinced that your worldview is consistent with the worldview that's right. So they just make it about you. Clearly, you're not seeing this right. Clearly, you're not thinking about this right. Anyone who would presuppose a God wouldn't think that. They wouldn't think that this narrative is wrong. I wonder what Eli would think would be okay about that.
Well, if what you say is true over here, then there's some problems over here in terms of how you want to understand evidence, logic, knowledge, and so forth. Okay, and that's basically the route we would take. Now, what that looks like, of course, is going to depend on the nature of the discussion, who you're speaking with, and things like that. Okay, all right. Give me evidence. Okay, what do people mean when they say "give me evidence"? This is important. Okay, when the
Otangelo Grassa. Is this Peter? It's early enough in the morning. I think it is. Gone the good old times when you were bitching about my buddy Darth Dawkins. Hi, Jeffy. This might be. We offer Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. You do not. Christians do not offer Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ offers himself, giving us the forgiveness of sins and eternal life. Everybody has an eternal existence. They either have an eternal life or an eternal death, right? Atheism, on the other hand, does indeed not offer anything. That I agree with that. Yep. And if you're wrong, oh well. Yeah. Is that really Otangelo? I haven't seen him around in a long time. Christian Beetlejuice is here, who said his name 3 times. I've been waiting for Peter to show up. That's why I suspect this is. Everyone tell Otangelo, Titan. Yeah, okay. Otangelo Gresso, if that is indeed who you are. Titan Uranus says hi.
Believer asks for evidence or demands evidence, what he really means. Okay, because he's going to reject the kinds of evidence you're going to give him, especially if you're giving it from a Christian worldview context. What the unbeliever really means when he says, give me evidence, is this. What they really mean is, give me evidence that is independently supported, neutral and unbiased, that we can objectively evaluate and then draw conclusions. So basically, he's asking for neutral evidence. And every time you give evidence, he's going to reject it, because if you're going to offer the evidence within a Christian context, it's not neutral evidence. So he wants neutral evidence. But
neutral evidence. What is this, Eli? Good God. Eli's really drank the Kool-Aid on this. This is bad. And this would not help anybody in some kind of precept debate. I celebrate the hero of the story, Judas, who gave me a 3-day weekend. I don't get a 3-day weekend. I mean, I do this. I do this week. That's only because I'm taking sick leave off the beginning of next week. But yeah, no, I don't get it. But that's because I'm a civil servant and they don't recognize it. In some companies they do.
You're not going to give him neutral evidence because A, we do not want to grant him that evidence can be neutral, and B, neutrality is impossible. Okay, there is no such thing as neutrality. There is no such thing as examining the evidence in an unbiased fashion.
That's not entirely true. The fact that we have biases doesn't mean that you can't do your best to examine the evidence as unbiased as possible. You acknowledge that biases are a thing. But this is always a tricky thing. Like, well, you're biased. Yeah, but you're not shamelessly biased. You're not walking into it not with the inability to reflect on the fact that you are bringing a bias into it. As soon as you have the capacity to do that and realize that you're going to try to interpret this the way that makes you feel good or feel right or justify a previous conclusion, you can try to put a pin in those kinds of things, put the brakes on those, and be like, okay, second guess yourself, play devil's advocate with it. And for whatever reason, like, oh no, like the preceptor seems to be jumping into the fact, like, yeah, but that's not what people really do. Everybody's just shamelessly awful about doing this kind of stuff. No, they're not. Not everybody. A lot of people are, but you don't intuit your way through evidence. Examining evidence and things like that should probably be a counterintuitive process, because reflection is often the counterintuitive process. Nicholas says, Jeff, Alex Malpass did that years ago after his conversation with Matt Slick. He had a stream of the preceptor where Alex asked how to deal with these problems with the person in the pew next to you. Oh, cool. That I don't know that I ever saw that one. That's a really good. I would love to see that conversation. I don't know that I ever saw it. There's also a good chance that I did see, if it was years ago, that I saw it and just don't remember it. Chad Judas coming in hot with the 30 pieces of silver. Yeah, and then dying somehow. But we got 2 different narratives on that, so. Almost the whole world celebrates Christ's resurrection tomorrow. I guess lying isn't really a sin then. Yeah, I don't think it's the whole world. The whole discussion is based on the Presup acting as a policeman for God. Coco's right. I only wanted to say hello, and you forced me to subscribe. It wasn't for you, Coco's. To be fair, I thought you'd already subscribed. Shame on you. No, it's fine. See above for my reasons for putting subscribers only on this one. Johnson. It might not be Otangelo. He hasn't talked about DNA yet. Maybe it is, though. This sounds like something. I have basically totally given up to use the Presup approach. I think you should. Better talking about the trees. Jeffy, send a link. Let's talk about Darth. You know what? I'll do that. Let's see. Let's see what happens. I think you're Peter, but maybe you're not. If you are Otangelo, you're getting kicked quick. Nicola writes, my question too. I had made it this far in the video. This is weird. What the hell is neutral evidence? Evidence by its nature is discriminatory. Evidence for P necessarily is evidence against some set of contradictory propositions. Yeah. And I think in his case, like, there's no such thing as neutral evidence in the fact that we don't approach it without a preset, without some kind of preconceptions. Oh, folks, it is Otangelo. Welcome, Otangelo. Happy Saturday morning. Well, it's Saturday morning for you. Are you still in Brazil?
Yeah, sure.
How have you been? I haven't seen you around in a long time.
Good. I'm good. And you?
Yeah, I've been fine. Yep. So I'm not really talking about Darth this morning, so I thought that was an interesting thing to put in there.
Well,
we're just talking about
joke.
Eli.
I mean, you've spoken years only about Darth, so I put that in.
As long as he keeps tilting at his windmills, I'm gonna keep talking about him. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, he's on TikTok now. He showed his face. I don't know if you saw it.
I did. Yeah. Well, yeah. Either he accidentally did it or somebody did it to him. I'm not sure how TikTok.
Yeah,
works,
I think it was accidentally. I mean, I still cannot imagine him talking. I mean, in my view, he looks kind of boring,
Yeah, I don't see too much other than him kind of. I mean, I imagine TikTok is going to drive him crazy. But he's still trying. I did catch somebody had a conversation with him, I think last week, on Discord. So he's splitting his time between Discord and TikTok. But anyway, is there anything that you wanted to say? I don't want to keep you on here because I'm not really having any other guests on here. I'm going to try to get through Eli Ayala's video. But I did, I figured I'd send the link out if it was you. I was actually thinking you were Peter, with one of his sock accounts. But it's good to see you. And I guess I'm going to let you go. But I want to give you. Do you have anything that you want to say? Happy Easter, anything like that?
Oh, sure. Happy Easter. If believing or not, whatever. Have a good time with your family and friends.
Yeah, I think we're doing roast chicken and potatoes tomorrow. So
cool.
It's still kind of left over from my family, but yeah.
Okay.
All right. Otangelo. Catch you later. See ya. Okay, so that my apologies to Otangelo for thinking that he was Peter. I don't think that he likes that comparison, but to be fair, Peter's got a lot of sock accounts. So. Anyway, with that being said, Otangelo has stepped away. Well, I've dismissed him because I'm not really having guests on. Let's get back into this give me evidence portion of the Presup thing from Eli. This is not tracking with me. Also, I need to speed this up a little bit. I had done that before. Let's speed this up to 125. Okay.
Indeed, to assert the possibility of neutral facts is to already be biased against the position that says there are no neutral facts. Isn't that right? If you say, we need to approach the evidence in a neutral and unbiased fashion, you already have an implicit bias against the view that says that there are no unbiased facts.
That doesn't have anything to do with that doesn't have anything to do with evidence. Good God, man! If there's a fact, I mean, I don't know how to put this. Isn't the fact going to be biased towards the evidence, or vice versa? Like, that's kind of the point. If there's blood, I'm like, well, just because you saw a body and blood on the floor does not mean. I mean, that evidence is not biased towards the fact that person was killed in a way that they bled out on the floor. Like, it's not evidence for them being unharmed. Like, Spooky. Oh, it is orange jello. I guess I was wrong. I was too. Folks, for anybody that's offended by the presence of Otangelo, because he has said some offensive things and done some offensive things, I did post the link in there because I did believe that was going to be Peter Tucker, but Otangelo is in the live chat, or maybe, possibly not. And Nerdy wrote, so you thought my AI generation was Otangelo? Cool. Don't put that out there. I'll start believing that. I'll start spiraling.
Right. So reality is there is no neutrality, and so we do not give this kind of evidence. We give evidence, but not this kind of evidence. Okay. And so again, it's because of our commitment to the lordship of Jesus Christ and the truth of our worldview. God exists is what it is true, and we argue from that position, not to that position.
Convenient. This doesn't really have anything to do with how he's like nuking evidence here. Give me evidence that is independently supported by a neutral, unbiased, that we can objectively evaluate and then draw. That's kind of the point of evidence. You're evaluating it. We don't give this kind of evidence. They don't. Why wouldn't you give that kind of? How is it unbiased if your evidence ultimately is just what God reveals to you? That is the definition of biased evidence. The only thing that you can know is what this other mind, this agent, this being, God, reveals to you. What they allow you to know. So I'm really not sure that he's thinking this through. Hey, morning, Doubting Thomas Jefferson. Have you sent that? Are you talking about the link? I did put it in the chat, but I'm not really bringing in any other guests. So I just did that because I wanted to verify if Otangelo Grasso was in fact Peter. At least when Otangelo has said horrible stuff, you can kind of see the source of it. What is PineCreek's excuse? PineCreek's, I can source it, but I would be guessing. It would just be rank speculation. I think he watches a lot more Fox News than he is willing to admit to his audience.
Okay. All right. So here's a little thing I learned from Doug Wilson, Pastor Doug Wilson. He was on my show.
Oh my God. Doug Wilson, that freak. Sorry. I think I just gave a biased opinion there.
And he said something that stuck with me, and I use it all the time. Suppose you have the nice atheist who's asking for evidence. You see, he seems really open. Maybe the Spirit of God is working on him, and he says, "Man, I just want to be familiar with the evidence for what you believe as a Christian."
The Spirit of God is working on him.
When the atheist is behaving, as Pastor Doug says, yeah, give me evidence. Right? What's the evidence for the resurrection? Well, here's the evidence for the resurrection. Here's what Christians believe. Here's the history. Here's some of the data. Those sorts of things. Okay. And depending on their response, then you deal with the presuppositions if necessary. If someone asked me, what's the evidence that Jesus rose from the dead? And I gave the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. And the person says, oh my goodness, I've never heard this before. This is life-changing and transforming. And then God opens his heart and he receives Christ. I'm not going to say, well, wait a minute. You didn't let me get into the presuppositions and the transit. That's not what we do, right? He asked for the evidence, give him the evidence. Now, of course, when we give the evidence, we always have one foot in the data and another foot in the broader worldview context, which makes sense of the data. But sometimes the broader worldview issue does not come out in the discussion in an explicit way. And sometimes it does. Sometimes when you present the evidence, there'll be pushback, and that pushback will actually highlight an important worldview presupposition the unbeliever has. Okay. And so this is very important, right? There's nothing wrong with giving evidence. Again, as I said before, we don't give it in a neutral fashion. That's the key. All right.
If all you're going to do is hold on to the whole worldview tactic to basically say anytime that they object to or call into question something that you're saying you're using as evidence to support this Christian worldview kind of stuff, and just so like, well, this is exactly what I said before. Like, well, okay, I'm assuming that this Christian worldview is true. I'm assuming that the Christian God exists. How do we deal with these contradictions about other claims that you've made about morality being objective? If morality is objective and we have contradictory moral positions in terms of Christianity today versus, say, God's covenant relationship with the Israelites in the Old Testament, what do we do about that? Well, as a presuppositionalist, you get the advantage of trying to deal with those data points, or if you think that atheist skeptic, maybe they're up to something, maybe they know more about biblical literature than you do, challenge their worldview. They're like, you know what? I just don't think you're ready to be a team player. Right? That's abusive. Because that's basically, to me, that's just kind of akin to gaslighting. you're just going to be like, you know what, your head's not in the game. You're just not ready for this. Yeah, this opens the door for the precept to be to engage in a lot of abusive dialectic tactics that are not beneficial to anyone, especially the person who becomes prone to using them. If Eli had a point in any way when he said, you're going to use these precept thing and you're going to win so many arguments, it's going to go to your head and it's going to cause the risk of becoming a pride thing. That is not the risk of the precept argument. The risk of using the precept argument is believing that you're winning all the time, because it opens the door for you to engage in this kind of manipulation that gives you the false impression that you are, quote unquote, winning debates, when in fact what you're doing is twisting dialogue. That's not a healthy thing for anyone to get in the habit of doing, especially if they're part of a faith tradition that purports to be about truth and love and kindness and compassion and ultimately eternal life and salvation.
Now, suppose you have an atheist troll who's, he's being a jerk, right? We've seen these types, and of course, Christians can do this as well, right? But we see these types. Okay, give me evidence, and I love Sai's answer to this. Sykes and Briggate's answer, and Vicky's spot on here. He says, "Well, what evidence would convince you of the God who says you already have enough?" Right? So now we're being more explicit and in your face. Yeah, God. The Bible says you already know that God exists, and you're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. Do I say that in every conversation? No. But is it appropriate sometimes to bring that out right out in the front? Absolutely. Okay. And at that point, we just go for the jugular, right? I don't grant you anything, bro. Make sense out of anything. Make sense out of truth. Make sense out of logic. Make sense out of
Explain the inexplicable and then come at me. No. Pass. What evidence would convince you of the God who says you already have enough? Where did God say I had enough? If you say he says it in the Bible, you can miss me with that, because God didn't write that. Men did. God didn't tell me I have enough evidence. If God started talking to me, that alone would be significant evidence. But God doesn't talk to me. There are people who have written books where they claim they know what God says and are telling me what he wants. That's the evidence that I have. I have evidence that people say they know what God said, and here it is. Now, take it or leave it. Usually it's take it or else. It's, depending on the Christian. So where am I supposed to go with that? That's the evidence that I have. If you are looking at it, how did he put it? Neutrally, then the exact state of affairs is we have books. I think Christians would acknowledge those books were written by people, and those people wrote things down, and the things they wrote about, in some cases, if you want to just take the Bible to be a narrative, the story that they wrote says that God says that X. If you are looking at the Bible as God says this, it's the same as, you have missed the point of your own standard for approaching evidence. Unless you do admit then that your standard for approaching evidence is to, like, oh, you know what? I'm coming at it from I admit my bias. My bias is Jesus. My bias is correct. You're coming at it from a bias. Your bias is Jesus might not be real, and that bias is wrong. Okay, how do we determine that? Well, we can determine it by looking at the evidence. But you won't look at the evidence. You wouldn't acknowledge the skeptics' claim, their observation, that the evidence from the Bible is that men wrote that God said that. You will just say, no, the Bible says that. That equals God says that. That's evidence enough for me and for you. So pound sand. Right? We can't get anywhere if we don't agree on how to evaluate the evidence of this stuff. If you're going to claim that it has special powers, was written under the influence of special times and special inspiration, special revelation, you need to be able to find evidence to support that. And they can't. Alex Baptiste, a nice atheist, because atheists are generally terrible. A lot of us are generally terrible. I mean, just speaking for myself. Thank you for the reminder. Let's see. Only 5 likes? Jeepers, you're a tough crowd. It's early in the morning for some of us. And I don't expect likes from the international crowd. I expect the Canadians to withhold their likes and people from the UK.
Of reason without God. All right. And every time he
I don't know why. I just figured that they're going to be harsher critics about this. Maybe find it to be more cringe, like the kids say.
tries, I'm going to show him that A, his view is absurd, it reduces to absurdity, or B, he has to borrow from my worldview even to get his view off the ground. Okay?
No, if
And
you're gonna,
that's what we
no, you're not borrow. No, no, you don't borrow from. Oh my God. If my worldview reduces to absurdity, I'm not borrowing from your worldview to prop it up. The only worldview that is not absurd is the Christian worldview. So I have your worldview. I'm just cutting stuff off of it. So that doesn't track. The other thing too, I'm just going to say how your worldview reduces to absurdity, and now I haven't figured out how my worldview reduces to absurdity because we haven't established that my worldview is possible. Eli, the only worldview that we've established is the Christian one, and you're saying that if I have, and it seems to me that the idea here is that if I have any objections to it, I'm not worldviewing in a Christian way enough.
try to do. Now, basically what Doug Wilson told me is, I think he was talking about C.S. Lewis. And he says, I see some aspects of presuppositionalism in C.S. Lewis. And of course, I'm not saying C.S. Lewis was like a Van Tillian presuppositionalist, but he said, Pastor Wilson said that for C.S. Lewis, when the atheist was behaving, he just gave him the evidence. But when the atheist was misbehaving, then he would argue, without God, you can't make sense of anything. And then he would take this kind of jugular approach. Okay. So I think there's an appropriate place for both those ways of going about things.
That doesn't get you anywhere. That's just somebody basically giving up on the conversation. He's just admitting that C.S. Lewis wrote that, when I get to a point where I think that the atheist is being naughty, this is the only thing I'm going to give them. They can't know anything, and they're wrong by default because they disagree with me. That is evidence that C.S. Lewis has given up talking to that person because he just thinks that person's bad. If that's all Presup is, which is what I've consistently been trying to tell people that it is, it's a shit tactic basically designed to find new and weaselly ways to poison the well, engage in passive aggressive ad hominems and kind of genetic fallacies, then I think we're off to a great start.
Okay. All right. So first, we also want to recognize what evidence is. People talk about evidence. We want to make a distinction between evidence and proof. Evidence and proof. You give evidence for your position, and then someone might say, "We didn't prove your God. You didn't prove your position." Well, evidence and proof is different, right? Proof is an aspect of arguments. Evidence deals with not necessarily arguments. Evidence can support an argument, but evidence in and of itself is not necessarily an argument, right? So evidence is the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true. Okay, it's important to know what evidence is. Okay, and it's also important to know that in the very idea of evidence, there are presuppositions. What are the presuppositions?
Is the presuppositional apologetic is it a mind virus, and that anyone that really gets into it develops this weird verbal tick of ending a lot of their statements with okay? Eli's doing this almost as often as Darth does. It's weird. And usually if I hear Darth using it a lot, it's when he's engaging with someone. Eli's doing this and he's just monologuing.
Of evidence. That's right. Now we're going to go back to press the repeat button, right? Evidence presupposes truth. Evidence presupposes, in this case, the reliability of our cognitive faculties, our senses, presupposes the uniformity of nature, all these fancy words that we'll not use, necessarily in our conversation. But
I would say this is always childish. The idea that if you're gonna talk about whether or not you can use evidence, what we need to do is, do we have the capability of coming to some understanding of what truth is? Like, truth is in like what conforms to reality kind of thing, or whatever you're talking about. Yeah, I think we can do that. Otherwise, if those aren't there, then we don't have any reason to talk. Now, this is a canard, because the whole point of the Presup thing isn't that the atheist can't know what truth is and they can't use evidence. The problem is that thing truth and all these things have to be grounded in God, otherwise they wouldn't exist, which is a claim they need to support, and they can't, right? The claim that the atheist is making isn't that, God is impossible. The claim that they're making is they don't think it's real. I don't think that there's a God. And then they're like, well, if that's the case, then where did this stuff come from? Well, I don't know. That's your worldview. The Christian worldview claims that this stuff is dependent on God because everything else is too, which raises issues. But that's your worldview. So asking the atheist, like, well, if there's no God, then where'd all this stuff come from? I don't know where it came from. Like, well, if we're going to talk about evidence, can I even really have a conversation with you, Mr. Atheist, if you don't even acknowledge that truth is a thing? Like, why do I not, when did I say truth wasn't a thing? Well, because you deny the existence of a God, or specifically, you deny the existence of my God. Way to go, Eli. You just failed to do an internal critique of that atheist worldview. You are projecting and imposing an aspect of your worldview onto theirs. You don't think that there can be truth without a God, but the atheist does not believe that same thing. You telling them that truth can exist in their worldview without your God is you projecting that onto them. You are not looking at and the only critique that these guys will give is like, well, it has to be something. Maybe. Why does it have to be a God? Specifically, why does it have to be your God? They will consistently fail at this. They will just go back to asserting it must be, or there's nothing. If there wasn't a God, you wouldn't be able to make that sentence right now. If there wasn't a God, we wouldn't be here right now. So that's irrelevant. Try again.
But there are things you should be familiar with up here. Okay. Evidence has a whole host of presuppositions behind it. Okay. Logic, knowledge, and reason, and so forth. Okay. And at that point, especially with the trolling person, right?
Yeah, the apologetic is polite abuse tactic. Yeah, basically. Yeah, in the sense that it's feigning politeness and converting that into abuse. Exactly. That way that they, when somebody's like, "Hey, I think you're being manipulative," they go, "I called you sir. How could you? How dare you?" The precept is true because God exists and His word is true. Keep trying, Warren. That's not good enough.
Right. We're going to lay down the gauntlet. Okay. If you want to have a discussion with me, you're going to have to justify these things, because I'm not simply going to grant you things like truth, knowledge, reason, all these sorts of things for the purpose of undermining the gospel. So if you think you do not need the Christian God, okay, to make sense of your worldview, then build me a worldview. Show me how you understand, logic, knowledge, all these sorts of things without God.
You presuppose them. Why does he need that? I presuppose them. That's all you have to do. Just like he presupposes God. I presuppose a world with these things, but not with God. Or potentially not with God. Or with something other than the Christian God that you're saying. With an unknown. There's a question mark there if it's foundational. Maybe it's not foundational. Maybe these things that we're talking about, we presuppose them because they're foundational. Who knows? I presuppose them.
And at that point, we are now at the clash of worldviews.
Exactly. Because if you can presuppose a God that is the necessary foundation for all this stuff, someone else could presuppose that there is no necessary foundation for those things, or that there's another foundation for those things. Maybe not ultimate, maybe not a mind. So it doesn't matter what you do here. In trying to say like, well, because you don't presuppose my God, none of the stuff that entails from my God can exist for you. That makes no sense. He has done nothing to look at the worldview of the person that he's talking to. He has only looked at his own and said, hey, you're offering me an alternative that misses God. That's a key omission from my worldview. Therefore, your worldview doesn't hold up. How does that work? It'd be like saying, I drive a car with a V8 engine, and you just told me you drive a car that does not have a V8 engine. It has some other kind of engine or means of propulsion. Therefore, you don't drive a car. Batshit.
Okay, and then we are going to engage in a critique of the position. Now, again, is this easy to do? No, not necessarily. It can be difficult, be challenging, right? But that's basically what we're doing in principle. Okay, all right. So that is my last slide. I'm going to take this down here.
Really?
I hope that was useful for folks. And now we're going to transition into taking some of the questions. Okay.
Wow, we got out of the slides. I thought this was going to be 2 straight hours of slides. All right, here we go.
Before we do that,
Q&A.
we'll sip my coffee real quick. No, the coffee got cold. That's so sad.
It does that. Keep it on a warming plate, bro. You got that big apologetics money, right?
Oh, well, I guess I'll have to try and survive anyway. Okay.
Cold coffee is the trend now.
All right, so let's get back over here. Okay, so why aren't you Orthodox? Yes, so I reject the Orthodox authority structure. It's kind of the same reason I reject Roman Catholicism. Now, Eastern Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism.
This is sad to me when these guys come out like, I don't like Orthodox Christianity or Roman Catholicism. Those are the two fanciest Christianities. They're fancy. They got good buildings. They've got art. They've got like people in uniforms and stuff. You get a necklace if you once you make it to like level 2 or something like that. I don't know how Catholicism works completely. You can get a necklace of a saint or something like that. Yeah, why would you pass on that? Like, well, it's not biblical. Like, well, nothing is. Yeah, Jay Obadiah, where does truth come from just seems like a category error, like asking what color is a centimeter or what sound sweetness makes. I like that. That's pretty good. Brian, Eli is such a sad apology. This is kind of sad, but now he's going to get into some personal questions. So maybe this will reveal some things. Paul, how does he know his coffee is cold? Well, he relied on his senses, Paul. You're right. Critical error.
Catholicism are not exactly the same. But I reject the authority structures of both. I reject the claim that they either, Eastern Orthodox say, well, we gave you the scriptures, and you wouldn't even know the scriptures without us. And then the Roman Catholic says the same thing. And then Eastern Orthodox appeals to their fathers, and the Roman Catholics appeal to their fathers. I reject the authority structure. One of the presuppositions of my worldview is that language is a sufficient mechanism for conveying truth. And so because that is the case, I believe that I could read the scriptures and know what it means without, at least from a Catholic perspective, without an infallible interpretation. And from an Eastern Orthodox perspective, I do not need the traditions of the Eastern Orthodox Church to know what the scriptures mean. Okay, I believe that the Bible is revealed to us in human language.
It's interesting he's bringing this up. I don't know that the Catholics or the Orthodox would say that either. This is an interesting claim. He's saying I don't need either church tradition to know what the Bible means. I don't think Catholics or Orthodox Christians would make this claim. You acknowledging Christian tradition or the tradition of Orthodoxy or Catholicism isn't necessary for you to be able to understand the Bible. It's necessary for your it might be necessary for your salvation, though, because you're not part of the church.
Language that we can understand, and the fact that people disagree over what the Bible means doesn't undermine the fact that human language is still a sufficient mechanism to convey truth. Okay, because the fact that people disagree, you hear this all the time from Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholics, that you Protestants, you have all these different denominations. Okay,
yeah, with a lot of significantly different views. That's insane. Eli says that communication via language is infallible. I mean, it kind of sounded like that's where he was going. It's pretty weird. Nicholas got one here. Let's see. A worldview is functionally incomplete if it cannot account for something that should and can be accounted for, or cannot allow something done which rationally can be done. Presuppositionally does not allow for worldview comparison from a metaphilosophical point. So either presup worldviews are incomplete, or we have a metaphilosophical reason to reject metaphilosophy. John, yes, I did. Did I turn on subs only mode? I did. And the strategy for that was because I was covering PineCreek stuff. I thought, you know what? If every once in a while, I don't see this happen much with the live chat, but if somebody wanted to come in, or like Otangelo, if somebody wanted to come in and make comments or do anything like that, they should at least subscribe for at least 5 minutes. So that's why I did it. It was more like in case they and that might be a thing that I do from here on out if I cover anything from PineCreek, which has been few and far between. So yeah. So yes, it did.
The fact there are different denominations and different interpretations of various texts of scripture does not negate the fact that there is a correct interpretation and that I could know my interpretation is correct with respect to some essential feature of the Christian faith. I have no problem with Christians disagreeing over certain interpretations on non-essential issues.
Well, tradition would be an essential issue for a Catholic and an Orthodox. the notion of Christian tradition, which is something that I've never really understood this, where these guys will try to like sound ecumenical about this kind of stuff and say like, oh, you know what, between Catholics, if a Catholic and an Orthodox and a Protestant are all, jumped in and ganging up on a skeptic or something like that, they're going to act like they're all cool in the gang with each other, like everything's copacetic. But then you end up finding out later on, like, okay, well, let's talk about the value of church, of church tradition. Clearly, the Catholics and Orthodox don't believe that the other is correct on church tradition. Like there's differences big enough where you should be on team O or team RC. And then with any of the Protestants jumping in there, they're clearly not on board with it either, because they don't really acknowledge the importance of that. Most Protestants are going to be sola scriptura. In fact, I think all Protestants are sola scriptura, unless there's some weird offshoot that kind of does some kind of half-baked kind of, oh, well, Christian tradition means sola scriptura, or some kind of weird apologetic like that. So this just seems sad.
Okay, and how do I know which issues are essential or not? I think we can derive that from Scripture in many cases, and I think there can be fruitful discussion and debate within the household of God that is healthy. Okay, but I do not accept the authority structure of the Eastern Orthodox Church or the Roman Catholic Church. So that's in a nutshell. And when I do read the Scriptures, it's very hard for me to affirm, say, for example, Eastern Orthodox soteriology. I am firmly convinced that the Bible teaches a justification by faith alone. It's very hard for me to, like, someone say, hey,
I don't think that Catholics and Orthodox disagree. But there's the tradition aspect to it as well. That's part of the faith. I think this is just a disagreement in terms of like how they think this is going to work out later on. But yeah, Brian, to Eli, if he knows he's correct and another Christian knows they are correct, how does he resolve this conflict? A great question. See any debate between a Calvinist and an Arminian. And then what's interesting is that, they'll have these knockdown, drag out arguments about whether or not, how grace works, and whether or not you choose God or the Holy Spirit chooses you, whether you can know it. Can you really know that you're saved? Just tons of stuff about the nature of sin, harmatology, the nature of salvation, soteriology, the nature of the end times, eschatology, and just debate this kind of stuff. And they're like, okay, well, dust yourselves off, guys. Now we got to go out into the real world. And, remember to kick an atheist right between the legs next time you see one. It's just like, and we're all on team JC. Like, yeah, miss me with that, because I think there's a lot more divisions than you guys are willing to talk about. Like, they're united around a common enemy, but when left to their own devices, they will eat each other, and frequently do. Maya is here. Good morning, Maya. You've taken a wrong turn somewhere if you're a Doug stan. Yeah. I understand being a fan of Doug. Like Doug is pretty charismatic. He's pretty good on a mic. He's contradicting himself a lot with his politics and stuff. And so if you're going to put yourself out there as being kind of a savvy commenter on politics, current events, what these Christian apologists are up to, and things like that, and then you do things like, I'm voting for Trump because he looks like a bigot, he sounds like a bigot, and I'm really hoping that he puts the National Guard and the active duty military, lines them up on the border to stop the news coverage that gets Republicans wins in local elections. Like, Doug, your analysis is bad, and you should feel that. So I hope he sees this. Simus is here. Good morning. Well, good afternoon to you, Simus. It's afternoon for you, or evening at this point. Afternoon. Thank you for the reminder. Simus Funk, everybody. Let's see. There was one in here I missed. The Catholic Orthodox argument is just which silly hat to wear. Not if you talk to them, Rodent. Not if you talk to them. And hats are important. They cover baldness.
We reject justification by faith alone, and then when I read the Bible, I have to now tell myself, well, okay, even though it seems that the Bible's teaching that, I have to affirm what I've been taught. That's very difficult for me, because I do believe, and it's a presupposition, that human language is a sufficient mechanism for conveying truth. So when I read the Scripture, I think that the argument for justification by faith alone is clinching, as I see it. So that's one of the reasons why, and there's many. I accept sola scriptura. I don't find the objections against sola scriptura all that convincing. A lot of it is based on kind of just popular jargon, and some of the critiques that you hear online, they're just not really good. Now, you do have some stronger critiques in some of the scholarly literature.
Okay. Hey, Cutler Duck, good to see you. Happy Saturday to you.
throughout history. There's some interesting interactions on that view. But I am convinced that sola scriptura, Eastern Orthodoxy rejects that principle, as well as Roman Catholicism. So those are just a few points. Obviously, there's much more to this discussion, and I would imagine that an Eastern Orthodox person would have much to respond to in light of just a little of what I said. But here's one thing, though. I am incredibly interested in Eastern Orthodoxy, not because I think it's true, but I think there's a lot of interesting things within it that I find fascinating and I like to study. So I'm not an expert in Eastern Orthodoxy. There's a lot I don't know, but I do know this. I know enough about Eastern Orthodoxy to be grounded in my rejection of it. In other words, I reject Eastern Orthodoxy for reasons that I understand, even though
Definitely Cocos. Has anyone heard one? I mean, other than the fact that he's leaning into this, like, you know, he doesn't believe in church tradition because he's a Protestant. They do, and he's a fan of sola scriptura, so that's why he's not an Orthodox. Taking a long time to say this, but yeah, Cocos, as a balding man, yeah, me too. Hats are becoming key. Good to see you, JC Rocket. You can't have a solid foundation for a worldwide religion without a good silly hat or a shaved head, like kind of Buddhism, certain sects of Buddhism. I think Doug's the new Joe Rogan. Yeah, except I don't think that his viewer base is growing. Although Joe Rogan's may not be growing either. I'm not. I don't know.
no, there are some aspects of Eastern Orthodoxy that I don't understand. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Okay, why am I a Protestant? I am a Protestant, and more specifically, I'm a Calvinist, and I lean towards kind of a Baptist understanding, so a Reformed Baptist. And I'm a Protestant because I am convinced of the principle of sola scriptura. I'm convinced of the doctrines of grace. I'm convinced of the particular view of baptism with respect to the Reformed Baptist position, the London Baptist Confession of Faith. And so I'm convinced of those things from Scripture. And I'm willing, you know, if I have my Presbyterian friends, I'm willing.
Those aren't necessarily in Scripture, so that's always. I mean, they always claim to be. Any dogma or statement of faith is going to say, "Hey, this is based on Scripture. It's grounded in the Bible. Trust us. We've done the research. Here's the game plan. Thumbs up, thumbs down. If it's thumbs down, pound sand. If it's thumbs up, welcome aboard. Don't ask questions."
To like look at some of those issues, like baptism, believer baptism versus paleo baptism, those sorts of things. But when it comes to the central features of Protestant theology, yeah, I'm convinced they're true, and the specific tradition that I find myself in is within the Reformed Baptist tradition. I'm convinced that it's the most accurate position as represented in Scripture. And with respect to the non-essentials of the faith, I'm open to discussion and open to having my mind changed on a bunch of different things. And I think there's a healthy flexibility within there, whereas in the essential features of the gospel, I am staunchly committed to. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Turk Baikal says, what did I major in college? Okay, so I went to a couple of colleges. I went to community college to get my liberal arts degree. I went to St. Joseph's College, which was a private college in Long Island, New York, where I earned my bachelor's degree in secondary education and social studies, history. And then I went to Liberty Baptist Theological Seminary and earned a double master's, a Master of Arts in Theological Studies and a Master of Divinity with a theological focus. And that is the entirety of my seminary, Liberty Baptist Theological Seminary, and earned a double master's, a Master of Arts in Theological Studies and a Master of Divinity with a theological focus. And that is the entirety of my seminary.
With a theological focus.
Training. Okay. Now, I didn't want to go to Liberty, although when I did go, I actually enjoyed it very much. They had a really good online program. Now,
Alex Baptista, to be fair, I have sped Eli up. This is at 1.25. Not a lot, but he is sped up a little bit here. So if he's kind of coming across a little bit Ben Shapiro-esque, that might be why.
I know Liberty's been in the news not that long ago for some controversial stuff, but my experience at Liberty was excellent. I had a great time. I had great professors. I enjoyed the reading, the assignments, and papers, and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes I wish I was still in seminary, but I do enjoy not paying thousands of dollars and having a passion for learning. And so I'm able to do this stuff on YouTube, where I invite guests on and talk to super smart people, and I get an education that's free. So I enjoy this side of the coin as well.
Thanks, Alex. Opinion noted. Okay, fine. Dude still sucks. Concise. Ben Shapiro or Destiny. Yeah. And Paul D says, Liberty isn't a real school. I wish that were true. I mean, it is kind of. I mean, Dr. Josh went to Liberty. So yeah, he did not get his PhD there though. He went to Johns Hopkins, a real school, capital R. And that's where, and Johns Hopkins, that secular house of demons and witchcraft, sucked the Christianity right out of Dr. Bowen.
Okay. All right. How did I get? Well, thank you. How did I get so good at debating? Am I good at?
That's a loaded question. And also incorrect from the jump. How did you get so good at debate? Well, he hasn't demonstrated that he's debated here. And I don't know that he's demonstrated that he's good at debating anywhere. He doesn't give bad conversation per se. I've seen him in conversations, and he usually is pretty congenial, despite the fact that he is repping an apologetic that, like I said, is rife for manipulation and abuse. Coco says Master of Divinity sounds the same as Reiki Master. I know, when I hear stuff like that, I'm like, how are you guys any different than people that just fondle crystals, for fun?
Debating. Let me see. I've had maybe 4 or 5 debates to my name on YouTube. I thought they went very well. I had a debate / discussion with Tom Jump. I thought went very well. Got some really good feedback. If folks know who Tom Jump is, I had a debate on Marlon Wilson's channel.
That did not go great. The conversation between him and T Jump. I mean, it was kind of a debate, but it was more of a conversation, and it didn't go well. Not the same fame category, the same infamy category, but scaled down to the atheist shit tuber scale. That tracks. That tracks. And she's talking about Doug PineCreek relative to Joe Rogan in comparison. You're clearly feeling generous today, Spatch. Why are so many bad colleges named after vague concepts? It's funny, yeah. If they're a great college, they're named, they have kind of a, the name is unique to the location or something, But yeah, if it's just like Liberty or you wouldn't go to Happy Times fancy college place. I would go to an institution called Happy Times fancy college place, but I don't expect most people who do not embrace absurdity to take that seriously. So
He was my first debate with Cyrus the Skeptic. I have debated on modern day debates with a gentleman by the name of Negation of P, which I thought was a really good discussion and debate, and a couple of other informal interactions. And that's about, I think it was on Leighton Flowers' show. We had a little interaction on his show some years ago. But that's about it. Well, you think I'm a good debater?
I'd imagine T-Jump lost his mind 10 minutes into that debate. He starts getting a little impatient, but he doesn't. Like, I think I watched most of it. I think they have a conversation for 30 or 40 minutes, maybe. And T-Jump doesn't, I don't think he starts calling him an idiot or anything like that. I don't think it devolves into that. Yeah, he's not the most patient fellow. No, T-Jump usually is not patient. That is negation of P. I don't think it's spelled that way, but I see what you're doing there.
I appreciate that. Okay. All right. I'm going in order here. So Turk has asked questions here. I don't want to be here. Okay, so we're going to go. So Toto Bermundo says, I know your Bible says all believe in God. They just deny it. But I truly do not believe in God. What do you say to that, Eli? Do we flat out call him a liar? No. If you flat out call him
right, if you flat out call him a liar, you've demonstrated that you don't understand what that statement says. It is entailed from what the way most people use this. They believe in God, but they're denying it. It's entailed that they're either lying to you or they're lying to themselves. Calling them a liar would be kind of incorrect and dismissive, but it is entailed that some kind of deception is going on, possibly even self-deception. If they believe it's self-deception, they need to explain how that self-deception is possible. If it's being done by the person, or it's the effect of sin, or it's an evil demon doing it, or what. They won't. I've never heard them really even commit to this. They'll just say, most of them will then turn around and say, well, it's because you love your sin. You don't want to give up on this stuff because you know you'll have to give up on things if you accept Jesus. Like, I don't know that that's the case. Like, what exactly do I have to give up if I became a Christian? Depending on the Christian sects that I'm involved in, if I'm a Catholic, I don't have to give up smoking. I don't have to give up drinking. I don't have to give up dancing. I would just have to give up things like I should not be fornicating or cheating on my wife or staying out all hours or drinking to excess or even smoking to excess. So it doesn't sound to me like I'm denied anything that isn't already automatically bad for me, even from a secular or an atheist position. I probably shouldn't drink to excess because it's harmful. I shouldn't smoke because it's harmful to me. I don't need a faith tradition to tell me that those things are wrong. And certain faith traditions aren't going to deny you those things as long as you don't overindulge. So I've never really understood this whole thing. Like, well, you just love your sin. Which sin? That am I worshiping too many gods? I didn't honor my mom and dad. Like I love my parents. I don't dishonor them. I don't think there are any gods. So the idea that you shall have only one God, thou shalt have no other gods before me. I don't even have that God. So it sounds like I'm doing even better. I've never really understood this, and that's usually as far as they'll get. Well, you just love your sin. You don't want to give up on it, and you'll have to give up on things if you become, part of the bride of Christ, one of His believers. What would I give up on? Live streaming, blaspheming? Yeah, I would have to give up on that. That's a bridge too far.
I'm a liar, then chances are you are now going to break down lines of communication, which is not good. We want to communicate and have discussion. So one of the ways that we respond to this, okay, when someone says, I know your Bible says that, but I'm just telling you, I don't know your God, okay? Now, our job as apologists then is to try and demonstrate that He actually does. And the way we show that He actually does is we press Him on His own worldview and show that He must rely on principles that only make sense from within our worldview.
Okay, meaning that that's really the only worldview possible, which means that person's already in it. So now that they're in a revealed epistemology and a revealed ontology, how are they capable of denying the existence of God? What's giving them the capacity to do that? Coco said, if you want to sin, just be Christian. Ever heard of confession? Yeah. Oh, Babyfoot. The sin of autonomous reasoning. Yeah, that's probably my sin. Yeah. Can you sin if you aren't a Christian? Oh, you better believe it. Yeah, that's the whole point.
In other words, he couldn't make sense of the things that he thinks he can without having a knowledge of God, specifically the God that we're presenting. And that's where the internal critique is going to come. Okay. So basically, we want to expose the image of God that he has in him and the knowledge of God that he has in him that he's suppressing. And we expose that by pressing him in his worldview and showing that he must borrow from the Christian worldview in order to even argue against it. And that is evidence that he's doing that because he actually does have a knowledge of the God we're speaking. So that's how I would go about it. I wouldn't just flat out call him a liar. I would try to bear the burden of proof. So if I say, you know, the God I'm speaking of, I will bear that burden and I will try my best to expose the fact that he actually does know this God. And that will come in the form of kind of the line of questioning and critique.
Okay, then you're going to have to change the definition of what we mean by know. Because I don't know that God exists in the same way that I know I'm living in this location, that I know the day of the week, that I know my current body weight. I don't know it in that sense, but I do know it. So I must know it in some other sense. What is that sense?
Of his worldview that I just expressed a few moments ago. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Will you debate other Christian denominations? Yeah, I'm not against it. The reason why I don't debate so much is I'm so busy and debate takes so much prep. But perhaps one day I will get back into debating, but I wouldn't.
Well, I've found that debate doesn't take that much prep. But I've debated strange people. So
I wouldn't have a problem debating someone from another Christian denomination. Yeah, that's fine. Let's see here. So how do you know that you have the correct interpretation? I know I have the correct interpretation of something because I believe that language is a sufficient mechanism for conveying truth. So I would study context.
How would that justify what? That's not.
I would examine words. If you're debating an issue of the Bible, translations, the way we determine the correct interpretation of anything. Right now, someone's going to say, "But yeah, someone's going to disagree with you." Yeah, that's fine. There's a difference between me knowing I have the correct interpretation and me persuading someone else that I have the correct interpretation. Someone could deny I have the correct interpretation until they're blue in the face. That does not mean that I don't have the correct interpretation, right? So I will demonstrate the correctness.
Why are they denying it then? On what?
of my interpretation in the same way I would demonstrate that I'm understanding any text that I'm reading. Okay, I'm not a textual or linguistic agnostic where, well, because everyone disagrees, we can't know what anything means, right?
It sounds like that's the position you're trying to put an atheist in.
I would argue in the same way I would argue for anything else that's written down, right? You study the context, you read what's going on there, what's going on in the text, who's the audience, all those sorts of things that's involved in hermeneutics. I think we could use and employ to demonstrate why we think our interpretation of some concept or passage in scripture is correct. Yeah, that's how I do it.
Oh, just that easy. Yeah, you just read in context. Context of what? If it's context of theology or dogma, that's potentially dangerous. Like, I don't see this guy doing critical scholarship. I don't see this guy not having, I can see him having nothing but trouble with any of the videos that somebody like Dan McClellan puts out, or Kip Davis puts out, or Myth Vision puts out, or any of the experts that Derek at Myth Vision has on his Myth Vision show, with the stuff that they put out. And they're critical scholars because they're trying to look at the text, look at the origins, look at the original language, look at the original intention, try to put that out there. They're trying to get that research. What audience was this book written to? What was the context? What was the genre? What were the prevailing ideas at the time? What would be informing this author and his audience, or her audience? Usually it was his, about what they're writing. What are the philosophies at the time? That's the context for it. A historical, actual context for when these things were written, why they were written, to whom were they written, and hopefully who wrote them. Oftentimes we don't know. And he's, oh, well, I can just look at this and just say, oh, well, I can compare it to this, and in context with this. And if it just sounds to me like he's giving the pat, like, I can just match it up with theology. If it matches the theology, then it's true. If it doesn't, then I can disregard it. Tell me I'm wrong, Eli.
All right. Creamy cold. How do I answer someone making fun of biblical history? Like, example, Lot's wife turning to salt.
Is that biblical history? That's in the narrative. That doesn't mean it. Well, of course, for them. Oh my God, wow.
Yeah, well, you need to point out that making fun of a position is irrelevant as to whether the position is true, right? And
let's be fair. Oftentimes, somebody who's writing this kind of question is so touchy that when somebody writes, like, hey, do you actually think that Lot's wife turned into salt? They're just asking the question. Like, they're incredulous. Like, wait, this is a hell of a claim. They're leaving this place. It's being nuked from orbit by meteorites or something. And she turns around and misses home, which was a shitty place where people did shitty things to guests. That was the whole point of the sins there. Like, some new people show up and they didn't even give a crap. Like, they didn't, angels. I don't know. They're newbies. Let's do them. Like, not a great town. Lot's wife, they're leaving, oh, my stuff, and we had a great view or something like that. It's like she misses Sodom and Gomorrah. She misses the town. And because of that, poof, instant salt rock right there. I mean, yeah, if you believe that God would nuke a town or two towns from orbit with some nuclear meteorites or whatever Christians think that is, they often claim, like, oh, they've been to the desert and they use a Geiger counter and they can see stuff happen. Like, no, there's no evidence that happened. There's no evidence that his wife turned to a pillar of salt. Oftentimes when somebody brings this up, it's why, like, do you really think that happened? Just because the book says it does. Christians like, you're making fun of me. How am I making fun of you? I'm asking if you think this actually happened. Don't make fun of me. If somebody reacts that way, that gives me an idea that they doubt it. Like, okay, so this sounds stupid. Do you remember the part in the Bible where it says, don't be worried about the fact that it sounds stupid, that you're gonna sound stupid to us? And you're supposed to, like, maybe even take a little bit of, like, maybe don't let yourself get too prideful, because that might be a sin. But remember, that's how you know you're on the right path, because I think you're nuts. So how do I answer someone making fun of biblical history? You acknowledge that the Bible tells you that people are going to do that because they think that this stuff is crazy.
The fact that someone makes fun of the position or finds something silly, I would just say, of course you would find it silly because of your worldview, right? The reason why someone thinks someone turning into a pillar of salt is silly is because they have a different worldview. They don't have a worldview that acknowledges.
No, it's because we don't really have an example of people instantaneously being transformed into salt pillars. That's why. Even Christians don't. What's worse about Lot's wife is you just know a bunch of donkeys came by and went, ooh, yummy, salt brick. Yeah. Warren brings it doesn't have to make sense to you. God does what he wants for his own glory. Right. And, Eli could have said that. It doesn't matter that it doesn't make sense to them. And you know what? They're going to make fun of you anyway. It says that in the Bible too. They're going to think that this is ridiculous. This is going to come across as total nonsense to them. So just, jog on. That's all I had to say. Like, no, well, it's because their worldview doesn't comport with this. They can't factor in the fact that something like this would happen. Like, yeah, no, we can. But that's a hell of a trick.
Acknowledges God and the fact that God has revealed himself. And in that revelation, we have this story in which we find Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt, right? It's like, oh, you guys believe people coming back from the dead. That's ridiculous. Well, I would expect you to say it's ridiculous because you don't have a Christian worldview, right? Surprise, surprise. There's nothing surprising about that. So what I would do is I would highlight the fact that making fun of a position is irrelevant as to whether it's true.
I would agree. Making fun of the position is irrelevant to whether or not it's true. But if somebody's giving you a whopper of a claim, like this is equivalent to saying like my friend got so angry that he grew 2 feet taller. Actually, that might be less of a crazy claim than somebody turning into salt, but you know what I mean. If somebody's like, no, that didn't fucking happen. No, but nobody grows larger because they get angry. He's not the Incredible Hulk. Was he exposed to gamma radiation at some point in his life? Like, well, no, he didn't even turn even a little green. But I'm just saying, he got angry. Like, did he seem bigger to you? Was he like hulking out a little bit? Like, were you just intimidated a bit, or did he actually grow? Well, you know what I mean. Like, yeah, you're being crazy. That's a ridiculous thing. No, he literally grew 2 feet taller. Like, no, I didn't. So when somebody says that I'm not making fun of Christians, I'm not making fun of the Bible when it says that Lot's wife turned to salt. I would tease Christians who are like, that literally happened. No, it didn't. The story says it did. And there's a reason. There's probably the reason that's there is that there's a significant reason for that. Her heart longed for the horrible crap fest that she just got drawn out of. The place where the welcoming wagon actively sexually assaults people. She wanted to go back there. So poof, rock, salt rock right there. Salt lick for donkeys. That's what you get, Lot's wife. Instant justice. Maya says, I asked that once to a Jewish guy. He said that his tour guide pointed to a rock and told him it was Lot's wife. He took a piece of her home. He didn't put it in a salt grinder, did he? Like, I'll just put this, coarse salt flakes. Lot's wife really brings a savory umami to this casserole.
And so let's get to the real issues. Let's talk about why we think the Bible's true. And then you're right there hitting the ground running, doing apologetics and giving reasons for the hope that is within you. Okay. Making fun of someone or making fun of the Bible isn't an argument. So, okay. I think that's silly. Okay. You haven't added anything to the discussion. Okay. I think it's silly if the person's an atheist. I think it's silly that you don't believe in God. That doesn't get anywhere, right? That doesn't prove God's existence. It doesn't disprove God's existence. So let's talk about the real issues. And if they are genuine and they are interested in those issues, then then maybe the conversation will redirect itself and you're able to talk about, the issues that really matter. Okay. All right. Let's see here. I got a couple more. What are your thoughts on Jay Dyer? Yeah. So I've watched a lot of Jay Dyer stuff. Again, I'm not Eastern Orthodox, but I really enjoy his debates. The debates where I don't want to say.
Dustin Taub unlocking a new kink. I like lots of Lot's wife on my potatoes. I bet you do. I bet you do. Nicola, the thing I like about the Lot story is how Machiavellian God is. He promises to spare the cities if there's one good man in them. Then has the angels lead the good man outside it to destroy them. Exactly. My brother and I were just talking about this, Nicola. And just like, yeah, he's standing up there and like, Abraham's pleading with him. Like, wait, you're just going to torch the whole place? There's 50 good people there. Like, yeah, you know what? If there's 50, I'll let them live. But when Abraham's like, wait a minute. What about 40? What about 30? What about 20? What about 10? What about 1? God's like, fine. You know what? No, we'll greenlight them out. We'll evac them. And then hit the place. We're already on target. The satellite, you got to wait for the satellite to come around and on. No, it's there. Hit him with the railgun.
The debates where he's behaving, when he's actually just debating, I think he is an excellent debater, in my opinion. I love his responses to atheists when he takes atheist calls and things like that. I think at kind of a general surface level, I think he does use the presuppositional approach in a very effective way. Now, there is that deeper question as to.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't really get into the I mean, it's all tag for Jay Dyer, but yeah, I mean, Presup is so based on a tag argument that it's essentially the same thing. But I don't think Jay Dyer is very effective. I think Jay Dyer, when I've seen him like have these discussions with people, he ends up in a lot of loops with them, like a lot of Presuppers do. I don't know that he loses his cool. I've seen him try to overtalk people and kind of bulldoze. But yeah, I just don't find any of this to be very effective. I never have. To me, Presup is most effective at encouraging people to get angry at Presuppers.
Whether presuppositional methodology is consistent with an Eastern Orthodox perspective, and of course, Jay thinks that's the case. Of course, me coming from a Van Tillian perspective, I think that consistent presuppositional method flows from a consistent Reformed.
Japanese lot wife turns into dashi. Yeah, Yeah, that stuff's delicious. I'd still cook with it. Yeah. Somebody get on it. Lot's wife table salt might be a marketing success. It could be. It could also be considered sacrilegious. So, not a great success in the United States. 35% of the population are like, I won't buy it because, for the same reason I won't allow my kids to have toys that have the word demon in them and stuff. I wouldn't even let my kid watch the gargoyle show. Those gargoyles are clearly demonic.
Theology. But be that as it may, those differences aside, I think Jay does use the presuppositional approach effectively in his discussions and debates. He's very knowledgeable in church history. Again, as a Reformed Christian, I'm going to disagree with him on his critiques of sola scriptura and justification by faith alone and those sorts of things. But as a debater, I have benefited greatly from watching a lot of his stuff. Now, on the other hand, he can also come.
Benefit in what way? Like just kind of clapping along, like, "Ooh, you own that skeptic." Ooh, yeah, spooky. Keep it next to the Ezekiel bread. Now, full disclosure, and I think this is kind of funny as somebody who's a non-believer. I do enjoy Ezekiel bread. It's of sliced bread available in a store, most grocery stores. It is my favorite bread. It's got all the Bible stuff all over it, but I think it's still, especially toasted. I love that bread. I even like it as a grilled cheese. I mean, it's dense as hell. But yeah, it's fantastic. If I can't get, like, if I don't make my own bread, if it's not like a homemade loaf of like kind of a French white, or if I'm not getting that from a store, if it's pre-sliced bread, that's stuff for the win. Plus, it's like, I don't know, 4 grams of fiber per slice. It's ridiculous. Like, it's basically a fiber supplement. What is Himalayan salt then? Yeti tears? It might be. New brand name. Lot of salt. Yeah, hide it that way. Lot of salt. Like, everybody's like, oh wow, oh, that's kind of on the nose a little bit. Like, oh, you have no idea. There's something hidden in there.
Across in another way that I don't think is very helpful, and I'm sure those who follow Jay, they'll probably be like, "Oh, Eli's just a softie," I don't know. I just disagree with
that God has turned into a spice. No, but I kind of wonder about like what the Shia from the worms from Dune. That spice. Are they like recycling their dead? Is that kind of a thing? I don't know. I haven't finished reading the book, and I'm hoping to get a little bit more insights on what Frank Herbert did with that. Seen the movies, still have not finished that book. It is slow.
is the approach, and I'm not a softie. I think debate involves pressing someone,
Ugh.
critiquing them, even exposing the foolishness, right? Just pounding the opposing view to the ground like powder. I think that debate is an appropriate place for that. But
pounding the opposing view into powder. Debate doesn't really. That's not the point of a debate. The point of a debate is to present two sides of an issue and then have an opponent, proponent, whatever, discuss, debate, present, and then that puts it out there for people to decide. Not to pound one of them into submission. That's not what debate is. It's not wrestling. A lot of space prostitutes in the later Dune books. Maybe I should skip ahead then. Sorry. All right. I think I'm going to shut this off because this is just him babbling. He's just taking weak questions.
There's nothing to
Yeah.
use. Of course, the authority of the church is going to play a very important role.
Ugh. Okay. So this is pointless. Does this go on? How long does this Q&A? Does he? Yeah, this. Okay, so his Presup thing was only like an hour, 40, maybe 45, 48, 50 minutes or so. I don't know why he has this huge. He should have split these up. But that's it. Yeah. So we concluded the Presup thing. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to see if I can find the links to what Titan had shared before. He's describing debate like a Tinder date. Disturbing. Oh, hey, JL Warren's here. I don't know if this was your first comment, JL. We still need a Gargoyles Gummy Bears crossover. Yeah, that's long overdue. I don't know where that's at. I debate to give a defense of the gospel. I mean, the gospel is its own defense. So you don't really need to defend it. Okay, let's remove him. Let's get. I do want to get into these other videos and see what's going on here. Hopefully, they're safe for distribution. All right. Titan. Let's see here. Oh, that's from Twitter. Oh, these are all from Twitter. I don't know if I'll be able to share these out. Yeah, I probably can't. Without sharing a whole screen, which I don't want to do. Yeah, I guess I'm going to wrap it up there at 2 hours. But Titan, thank you for these clips on the convoy. I am definitely going to give these a view. These are going to be, I'm going to enjoy these quite a bit. So with that being said, I guess I'm going to wrap up now. Thank you all for showing up. There's other stuff happening. I know Peter DeTucker who usually stays in touch with me. Aaron Ross should be going live at around noon or 12:30 or 1 later today. I think he does one of his shows on Saturday. I don't think it's Blasphemers. Maybe it is Blasphemers Bible. I thought he did that on Thursdays, though. Also, I'm going to be doing a show. I'm going to be a guest on Maya Atkinson's channel tomorrow night. And she usually goes live at around 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I'm going to be a guest over there. So if you're not subscribed or if you don't see the notifications, I'll post links to it as we get closer to it, probably in Discord, some of the Discord channels, and I'll probably tweet them out on social media. So if you happen to get those are going to be around. I don't know how many other people are going to be in the panel, and I'm not sure exactly what topic we're going to be discussing, but we've been planning this for she had me bracketed in about a month ago. So hopefully she's got me on there for something that she feels I can contribute to without sounding like a clown, which I tend to do. But other than that, Spooky always loves chaos. Spooky does kind of love chaos. Yeah. Thank you very much for the super chat, Turing Test. Thanks for the stream. You're very welcome. Yeah. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your commentary. Really, thanks for that super chat. The only other update I've got, equipment is nearly almost all here. I still have to assemble the desk, get the office set up. I do have to do some wiring in order to get the LAN cable in there because this is an old apartment and it doesn't have a LAN connection. And I do want to be wired in. I don't want to have to rely on wireless like I've been doing with this laptop. So a few more steps to go, and then I should have everything set up. A couple other things I need to pick up, possibly another monitor. Not sure if I need to. I want to. Not sure if I don't need 2 right now, but I do want to get them set up, and possibly a new camera, but the camera setup is going to wait. I'm going to be doing a lot of shopping for stuff like that. So other than that, yeah, hopefully pretty soon it'll be shifting around, might even shift from doing like a StreamYard setup to doing an OBS setup. If I can, be patient enough to learn that without damaging my equipment. Sometimes technical stuff gets me cranky. You're always amazing. Thank you for that. I don't think that that's true, but thank you. I appreciate the encouragement. I may try to break your brain, but you'll be fine eventually. That's fine. Yeah, don't break it away. I mean, it's already kind of broken, so what you break might actually shift things back into a more positive direction. So that's nice. Yeah, I guess with that being said, I will be back. My show, when I guest on that one, is probably going to be my last one. Monday and Tuesday, I am going to be out for. I'm going to be detained with medical issues. basic kind of routine medical procedure that I got to go through, but it's going to take some time. Monday is prep day. I'm not going to say exactly what it is, but I think you'll know. I'm not going to be reliably able to stay away from the bathroom facilities, if you know what I mean. And then Tuesday is the day of, and then I'm going to be whacked out on probably like a general anesthesia for most of the rest of the day. So maybe I'll be back Tuesday night while I'm still kind of feeling the effects of the general, because I think it's propofol. So yeah, expect me back on Tuesday or not until next Saturday. It's just going to sort of depend on what all I have to catch up with. But yeah, I'm going to be missing a couple days of work and going back into things. So if stuff drops, I will be keeping an eye on stuff and hopefully cover a few things. But yeah, this stream and Mondays, it might be the last for, for the rest of next week. I might be out. But then again, who knows? If I'm acting all like Mr. Burns from that episode of The Simpsons, glowing and, promising to bring you love, just know that that's me coming out of the hospital, and try not to hold it against me. So Warren says he'll pray for me. I appreciate that. I would appreciate meditation, thoughts, mindfulness directed my way, Warren. Not just prayers, but medical. Good luck, Jeffy. It's a very common procedure. Everybody has to get between the ages of, their first one, 45 to 50. I haven't said what it is, but I think I've given you everything you need to know. It's a gross one. And I am kind of nervous about it because I don't want to do the prep. Don't push yourself. We've waited months for a Jeff stream, and then you were just being lazy. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. Or there was the time I had the nervous breakdown, and I was out for like 2 months. So yeah. That one, that was a good reason. But the other one where it was like 5 weeks and I just didn't do anything, that was bad. I did, in my defense, I really did get addicted to a Like a Dragon game. So yeah, video games sucked me in. Lately, they've had less of. Take care of your. I will do that. And actually, I'm going to see some professionals Tuesday morning, so they're going to be taking care of my health for me. So we'll see what the news is. With that being said, no more rambling, no more ranting. Hopefully, I will be back. The next stream I do, like I said, will be on Maya's. The next stream I do probably be usual thing. Hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, I will be able to get on camera and change the format a little bit. Coverage is going to be the same, but hopefully, actually do videos instead of just kind of chatting it with the screen turned off. So thumbs up, fingers crossed. Hopefully that'll work out. That being said, everybody have a great weekend. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Take care of yourselves. I will catch you all next week at some point. Tune into Maya's if you can. Be good to each other and all that good stuff. Have a great weekend. Happy Saturday.